investors are going to bring on more investors to pay the other investors above them. Eventually, though, unfortunately, there's not enough money coming in to pay everybody up the pyramid, and the pyramid ends up collapsing. We've seen cases of pyramid schemes in Indiana, and Rick, do you want to talk about any of those?
Well, there's one in particular that comes to mind because we're still looking for the person that perpetrated it. It happened out of Grant County. Individual was a licensed agent, actually, in good standing. But it appears from our investigation for 15 to 20 years, he ran a pyramid scheme unbeknownst to anybody. It was discovered accidentally when another regulatory body went into an office to audit that office, and there was a check from this individual's company. So that led them to asking some questions. He disappeared. He's been on America's Most Wanted. As I said, he's been gone for 15 years now, but we estimated he stole about $25 million.
Right here in Indiana, it happens. Another type of scam that we typically see is affinity fraud. Affinity fraud we usually see in religious or ethnic communities. Affinity fraud is when they go in and obey the trust, disobey the trust of someone within that community. We had an example with a church community here in the state of Indiana, up in Anderson, where they went in and got the trust of the senior pastor, the senior community, and people started giving money, and the money was not used what it said it was going to be for, and it ended up being an investment scam. We're seeing this a lot, obviously, like I said, in the religious communities and ethnic communities. Affinity fraud pretty much preys on likeness and trust. They want to take advantage of what you have in common and use that to them, but use it to your disadvantage. Another type of fraud that we see in the state of Indiana and across the country are promissory notes. Promissory notes are a simple example is when somebody says, I owe you $25. Now, a lot of times the amount is much greater than that, but that's the easiest way to explain what a promissory is. Even something like that has to be licensed and registered with the Securities Division of the Secretary of State's office. And if it's not, that is actually fraudulent, and that is against the law.
We see a lot of promissory notes in the formation of small businesses. People seeking capital go to friends, neighbors, get the word out that they've got this great business plan, and they start seeking investors for that plan. It could be, or at least start out as a legitimate business, but most times it's not, and the money disappears.
Another type of fraud that we're starting to see, and this has actually become much more prevalent in the last 10 years with the dot-com era, is internet fraud. There's so many different types of internet fraud. The biggest one, you see phishing scams. You're constantly getting emails from, I'm a prince overseas and my family has come into this money, but I need somebody in the United States to help get this money for me. And a lot of those, anytime we like to say, if you get an email that says you've come into a lot of great money, it's usually going to be an email scam. What are some other types of internet scams you've heard of?
Well, there's so many I can't even start describing it, but outside of the internet, there are other ways for scamsters to use technology. Technology as simple as phones. There was a situation about 6 months ago where somebody made several million calls to different numbers, acting as if they were calling somebody they knew and said, hey, I just got a hot tip on this stock, blah, 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 you know, put as much as you can into it. Well, the person that received the call knew it was a call that wasn't directed to them, but they thought they had a hot tip. So what happened, there was a flood of buyers coming in to this particular stock, and the individuals holding the stock waited for the price to rise, as it will when there's an interest, and as soon as it hit a certain level, they dumped all their shares and everybody else was holding worthless paper.
It's sad when we see that, and you actually see some of those examples in a lot of the movies that Hollywood's producing today. There's many movies that share a lot of the different scam examples. Another type of fraud or scam is unscrupulous brokers. It's one of my favorite words to say, but unfortunately it doesn't have positive connotations associated with it. Unscrupulous broker, plain and simple, is a broker that's not out looking for the best for you. They often offer poor advice. They don't offer suitable investments for you when they're working with you, when they're doing your brokering for you. Unscrupulous brokers are those bad apples that we created this program for to educate Hoosiers across the state against. Unscrupulous brokers, like I said, tend to not have the best interests of their clients in mind. Some other kind of common types of fraud that we tend to see, one is senior fraud. Like Rick and I have both mentioned, senior citizens tend to be victims a lot to different types of fraud. Now, within the senior citizen community, there's certain types of fraud that scamsters will like to commit. One of them is variable and charitable gift annuities. We all like to give, especially around the holiday season. Everybody likes to give money, but unfortunately there's people who will form phony organizations and ask for you to donate money towards them. There's also people who create phony or not real annuity products, and the senior citizen community often is the people that the annuities are sold to, and if it's not real, you're not buying a real product. So that's one reason we encourage people to always register and check with our website to make sure that the person that they're buying from is a registered and licensed product that's being sold. Another type of fraud is viaticals, like what we mentioned earlier. Viaticals really became popular when the AIDS era was first becoming more prevalent in the United States. Viaticals is pretty much, in plain terms, betting on someone's life. Viaticals, people who were suffering from AIDS, they would go out and take their life insurance policy, pretty much take the money from their life insurance policy because they didn't think they were going to last beyond that point in time. Whereas now there's so many medical advances, people are far outliving what they thought with cancer and with different illnesses these days. So viaticals, people just have to be very careful when they're involved with viaticals.
Viaticals are still around. They go by a different name now. They're called life settlement contracts, but pretty much they're the same vehicle, and they are, by definition, a security.
Another type of fraud is promissory notes, like what we've already discussed. A lot of senior citizens fall victim to promissory note fraud. Another issue that we deal with here in the state of Indiana specifically is insurance agents and unlicensed agents. There's various states across the country where insurance agents fall under the same umbrella, the securities umbrella, as somebody who's working in the securities industry. But in the state of Indiana, an insurance agent has to be duly registered if they're going to be selling any type of security. They have to be registered with the Department of Insurance if they're going to be selling any insurance products, and they have to be registered with the Securities Division of the Secretary of State's office if they're going to be selling any security products. In other states, they don't have to be duly registered, but in Indiana, they do. So if you would ever come across someone who says, oh, I don't have to be registered in both, there's a red flag. You should contact our office. Another type of fraud that we're starting to see a lot, not only in Indiana but across the country, is mortgage fraud. And we're actually going to concentrate on this a little bit more in a few minutes. But mortgage fraud is something that we are starting to shift a lot of our focus to. There's a lot of different signs that people can be aware of when it's coming into fraud. If you ever heard the phrase, double your money in 90 days, we like to say if it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. These are all different red flags that you can be aware of if you ever come into these situations. Another was, if somebody says this is a risk-free guarantee, you know that's flat out not true, because no matter what, you're always taking a risk. You're never going to be guaranteed anything when you're dealing with insecurities. If somebody ever says you're going to have a high reward with a little risk, again, that's the complete opposite. The lower the reward, the lower the risk. The higher the reward, the higher the risk. You're lucky to be getting in on the ground floor. There's movies that say this phrase. Obviously, if you hear this, you're going to have your red flags up. You're going to want to be cautious if you hear somebody say you're going to be lucky to be getting in on the ground floor. Some investment myths that we typically see in the office. One is high reward with no risk. Again, this goes back to what we just said a few minutes ago. The higher the reward, the higher the risk. The lower the reward, the lower the risk. Another one is scams do not happen to smart people. Obviously, with the stories that Rick and I have both shared and the Secretary's experience, scams do happen to very smart, intelligent people. It can happen to anybody. This investment is guaranteed or insured. This is a myth. When you're investing, you're not guaranteed. You're taking a risk. No written information is available. If you ever hear this should be a good red flag for you. There should always be written information available on whatever product you're going to be working with. There's many prospectuses that are available when you're working in different funds. A lot of times, if there's no information available, the person has been pulling so much of the information out of the back of their head to fraud you and scam you. That's a big red flag that there should always be information available. No securities license or registration is necessary to sell this. That flat out is a lie, and that should be a major red flag for you. In the state of Indiana, they must absolutely be licensed and registered with the Securities Division of the Secretary of State's office to sell a security. Some other red flags that we typically see in the office. Only